All right. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday Together Talk. I'm Reverend Rebecca Burrow, founder and CEO of Building Reconciliation, Inclusion, Diversity, and Gender Equity. And y'all know by now, to our friends, we are known as Bridge. We are on a mission to create a more just, equitable, and inclusive world. Thank you for being here for another Tuesday Together Talk. Oh, we have such an exciting conversation this evening, and we are going to learn a little bit together because this is a topic that I'm a newbie. So I'm excited for this conversation. I'm excited for our special guest tonight, our guest conversationalist, Tammy Fisher. And more importantly, I'm excited that you all have once again decided to come to Tuesday Together Talk and just hang out with us once again. Now, listen, you all that are regular Tuesday Together Talk audience members, you know that we love to talk to you, but we want you to talk back at us, right? So that's what we need from you all this evening. So before I introduce my special guest conversationalist, I just want to give a shout out to some of you all that are here with us tonight. Good evening, Carrie Yvonne. Good evening, Lisa Friday. Thank you for being here. And good evening, Miss Rachel Christopher, one of our Tuesday Together Talk guests, one of our Tuesday Together Talk Take Two group experts, along with Lisa Friday. And she says, good evening to Tammy.
Good evening.
And Adrian Franklin, good evening and hello. And good evening to Dean. So thank you all for tuning in. I
Thank
hope
you,
that
Dean.
all will enjoy this conversation tonight. Hey, here we're just family having a conversation. So if you're new, just dive in because you are now part of the Tuesday Together Talk family. Welcome, Miss Tammy Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
I am so excited that you are here on this evening for this important conversation. You all know that Tammy is a global DEI doll expert. And tonight we're going to talk about why representation matters. And so, Tammy, I just want to start this conversation by giving you a couple of minutes to tell our audience something about you or several things about you.
Okay. So my name is Tammy Fisher, and hey there, lady. Um, so my name is Tammy Fisher, and I am a global DEI doll specialist. I refer to myself as a Jacqueline of many trades because I have done a lot of different things. So I am curious. That is my base nature, and that curiosity I want to say my name is Curiosity for my business, but that curiosity leads me down different paths. So I have done lots of different things with the doll space. I helped to launch a doll podcast, and I left that space during we launched it during COVID, and I left during COVID because I felt like I wasn't having enough time to spend with my kids. My kids and my husband were all here together, and they were my kids are university age. And I didn't, it's like this is the last time we're going to get to spend time together. So I left. And just recently, I've had three people invite me to speak at different events. And so I've been thinking about coming back into the space, and it's like apparently I have something to share.
Yeah.
So I'm coming back into the space, but in a different position. The doll podcast that I was part of before, we interviewed people were who made dolls, the creators and people who did clothing, that kind of thing. And I'm really more interested in how dolls, how humanity and dolls reflect each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my that's where I want to sit in this space.
Well, thank you again, Tammy, so much for being here on this evening. For those of you who didn't know, I've come to know Tammy through Tuesday Together Talk. She is always adding such great comments. I said, I need to know who this person is that has all this insight in these conversations. So, for those of you that are sitting out there in the Tuesday Together Talk audience, your time is coming. Okay. So Tammy, I want to go ahead and dive into this conversation.
Okay.
But I want us to just breathe a little. All you out there, breathe a little, get your water, green tea, or whatever you need to sip on as we go through this conversation. But I just want to ask you, how are you?
I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I am blessed. I'm excited. I am a new empty nester. So it's really interesting to be in this space where I'm being able to spend more time with my husband and to be developing relationships with my children as adults. So that's really cool. I'm spending more time with my dog. He's his dog bed back there. It's like I keep moving to try to hide his dog bed. But yeah, I'm doing really well.
Good. Good.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy day, but productive. So busy and productive are good when, it's busy and not productive. It's kind of an issue for me, but so
Yeah.
I'm doing well. And like I've told you, I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. So let's dive in. How long have you been working in the global doll industry?
So I've been So it's probably been maybe a decade. I've been a doll seller and then I did the doll podcast, but I've been involved with dolls all of my life. I am a doll lover and I can just sit and go through Instagram or YouTube or some of these places and just look at the dolls. I'm fascinated by them and I'm fascinated by what people do with them. I also, like I said, I like to see that how we interact with them and how we reflect each other.
Mhm. Okay, interesting. So, what I know that you're saying that you like to see how humanity and dolls that mirror. Uh,
Hmm.
so, is that what attracted you to the industry?
No.
Okay.
So I have been a doll collector forever.
Hmm.
I have a child who has a chronic pain condition. And the way that I became a professional in this arena was the year that my kid was diagnosed with chronic pain. We spent $20,000 outside of insurance to cover medical care.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, my kid is not eligible for disability. That that's a whole nother story for another time. But
Hmm.
I decided my kid liked dolls, I like dolls, and I said, well, maybe if I create a doll store when my kid grows up, my kid can have this doll store.
Hmm.
And at that point, my kid was not attending school. My kid's last full year of school had been fourth grade.
Hmm.
So my kid is now in university. Again, I would love to talk to you about that at some point, but
Well, when you come back.
okay.
But it's a great opportunity because you're already alluding to some of the diversity and
Hmm.
inclusion that you are helping to bring about in the industry. So, for my sake and for the audience sake, since you are considered a global DEI doll expert, can you explain to us what that means exactly?
Yes. So what I do is I work with people across the globe to increase doll diversity. And so, like last year, I edited a book for a doll photographer in Poland. I have worked with people in Africa and uh, Australia,
Mm.
in Asia, just different people about to get dolls, to create dolls and to get those dolls dispersed.
Mhm.
One of the things that I found interesting was that even in places where you think they would have certain dolls, they didn't. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a doll creator, and he's in Britain. And we were talking about diversity, and he said it's hard to find a ginger hair doll here. And it's like, how can you be right there next to Ireland and you don't have red hair dolls?
Yeah.
So that's been part of it. Another thing is I work with lots of people in Africa. So the same thing. There are many doll lines that have been produced because someone wanted to buy a doll for their child and they could not find a black doll. And that's like mind boggling for me that in Africa, a continent that is full of black people,
Yeah.
people are having a hard time finding black dolls.
Wow. That's amazing to me because audience, go ahead and start answering this question. Was race and ethnic doll representation available when you were a child? I need for you all to start dropping your comments for us. But what is amazing to me is I don't know. I have never thought about doll representation outside of the US.
Mm,
I just experienced it as a US challenge or issue. I
mhm,
I guess I had not thought about it. And part of that is, this tunnel vision that we have sometimes when it comes to our worldview. So it's just fascinating to me to hear how much input and how impactful the doll industry is around the world. And I believe that we are missing opportunities to, of course, impact our cultures in great ways when that representation is lacking in those places.
mhm.
So I'm not going to jump ahead. But
No, that, that's perfectly fine. I'm always fascinated when I go into stores and I hear from other people in their countries. I went to the store and the majority of the dolls are blonde haired, blue eyed.
Mhm.
And so I was looking, it's like, what percentage of the population is blonde haired, blue eyes? What is this about? And it was like less than 1% of the world's population is blonde haired, blue eyes.
Mhm.
Blue eyes are more common, but the blonde hair is not. And then when you put the two of those together, it's not very common. And so it's like, what is this? And so you go to the store and you look for a black doll. This is my experience. Go to the store, look for a black doll, can't find a doll. And I have literally walked out of stores and I've said to them, I don't shop at stores that don't sell black dolls.
Mhm.
If I don't see diversity, I don't spend my money there because I feel like if you can't support me, there are other places I can go. And I've gone into big box stores and I've seen dolls that are of the same line. Like I've seen a low end entry level doll made by one company, and they had a black and a brown version of this doll. And I think it was multiple white versions of this doll.
Mhm.
And the black and brown version of the doll were $5, and the white version of the doll was 3. And it's
Mhm.
like, what's that about? How do we do that? So I went to one of the people who was working there, and I said, why are these dolls priced like this? And she said, well, because they're different doll lines. I said, no, look at the boxes. The only thing that's different here is the color.
Mhm.
The dolls are different color. They had on swimsuits. Their swimsuits are different colors, but it's the same line.
Yeah.
And so we talked for a while. She says, well, okay, what I can do is I can reduce the price on the doll that you want. I said, I didn't come here to buy a doll. That's not what this is about for me.
Mhm.
What this is about for me is I think that, especially, I live in New Mexico, and we're one of the poorest states in the union.
Mhm.
So someone goes into the store and they go to buy their child, their grandkids, a doll. And you get in there, let's say you got 10 grandkids, and you can buy 10 white dolls for $30, or 10 brown dolls for $50. That's significant.
Yeah.
And we should not be put in a position where we have to choose to buy a doll that does not look like our child
Yeah.
for the sake of saving money.
Yeah. That's
So go ahead.
so interesting because you are hitting on so many different factors, social determinants, all these social location, all of these things that we sometimes don't notice.
Mhm.
Uh, because when we walk into a store to make a purchase for our children or whomever, when it comes to a doll, we're just looking for what might look like us. And if that's not available, we go on to the next best thing. But there are so many factors that's undergirding that system of keeping or preventing representation to happen, whether it's the cost issue, which is then the capitalism issue, whether it's the representation, who's the buyers at the store, who's being hired for those particular jobs. And then, of course, as you were saying, that cost factor related to now having to purchase something that's cheaper, but does not represent who we are. Let's get to some of these comments real quick. Rachel said, yes, my mother would buy me black Barbie dolls when I was a kid, and I'm so happy she did because it made me proud to see dolls that look like me. That is a wonderful thing, Rachel, because finding a black Barbie when I was younger was kind of a difficult thing. Lisa said, during my elementary grade school years, black dolls were not readily available, just white dolls. Yes.
That's my experience.
Yes. Carrie said, I had a life-size black doll when I was young, like 7 or 8. I coveted a black Cabbage Patch doll. And although I didn't get one for Christmas, I did get one. Aurelia Lee. Okay. I, and then Rachel says she also bought me black dolls too. So that was not Barbie dolls, and I still have them right now as a grown up. They look brand new. And Dean says, definitely not. I am a white male, but I always wanted a black doll as a child and was never able to find one. I also struggled to find brunette dolls. Finding brunettes with blue eyes was impossible. Yes, Dean. Dean
And
said,
things in Australia.
by the
Okay.
way. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Rachel says, thank you, Tammy, for breaking this down. I'm getting educated tonight on the doll industry and the representation of ethnic dolls. And Sarah said, I only brought my daughter black dolls. I found a Barbie and a Cabbage Patch. And so there were, at one point, I get in our society, we begin to see more representation, but
Mhm.
you're still talking about some of those challenges that exist even today in order to ensure that representation occurs, not just in one location, but around the country, and now even around the globe is what we're talking about tonight.
Yes,
uh,
I've helped. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
no, no, go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, so I have helped to get black dolls in Britain, Ghana, and Senegal. There's a woman, Guy, Gay. Her name is pronounced Gay. And she was giving away dolls in Britain. And she's from, I believe she's from Ghana and her husband's from Senegal. Either that or vice versa. And so she was giving away black dolls. So I found out about her and start talking to her. And she was telling me about how difficult of a time she was having finding black dolls. So I bought black dolls and sent her some black dolls. I am a member of a black doll group, and I asked them, do you have some dolls that you would like to share? And they sent me a number of dolls, and we sent those dolls, we just shipped a whole bunch of dolls there. And that's really important to me. And it's not only about representation as far as what happens in the store. I'm concerned about how we feel about ourselves. We live in a society, at least those of us in America, I can't speak for the whole world, but we live in a society here where we are a minority that is often overlooked, and we are force fed a whole bunch of things like this blonde haired, blue eyed standard.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest concerns is I think that if you go and you look at children and you think about your house and babies and what happens in your house, you're a little kid, you got a little sister, brother, baby cries, what happens?
Hmm.
People stop doing what they're doing to see what's going on with the baby.
Yeah.
And you learn that the baby has a really high position in the house because everybody stops. I mean, you stop. Everybody goes and looks at what's going on with the baby. And so you understand that baby's really important. So if you're like a person of color, you know, you're black, you're Latin, if you go and, you know, your parents go to the store and they buy you a doll. So let's say they couldn't find you a doll that looked like you, or they were expensive, whatever. You grew up with the typical white doll, blonde haired, blue eyed. So what happens is you learn to nurture that blonde haired, blue eyed doll.
Hmm.
And you say, I mean, you're just like, this is my baby, and I treat my baby the way mommy treats our
Hmm.
baby, or daddy, or, you know, whoever treats our baby. So it's really important. So I feed my baby, I clothe my baby, all these different things I do to love and nurture my baby. So we have this relationship with
Hmm.
this object
Yeah.
that is teaching us how to love and nurture. And we are learning to share that love and nurturing with somebody who doesn't look like us.
Right. Yeah.
And then we go on and we talk about how we need to have more body positivity, and we need to uplift ourselves, and all these positive things that we should be working toward.
Hmm.
Yet we give our children white dolls.
Yeah.
So they learn from the beginning that that doll, that white person,
Yeah.
is the most important thing in my world, because this is my baby and I have to treat it the way I treat
Hmm.
mommy treats the baby. And so what we're not learning to love ourselves. They say the first year of your life is the most important, and the first three are very significant. I think that during those times, kids should have black dolls or a Latin doll. What, you know what? If you're blonde haired, blue eyed, you should have a blonde haired, blue eyed doll.
Hmm.
Everybody should have a doll that looks like them,
Yeah.
so that they learn that they're beautiful, they're intelligent, they're important, they're smart, they're valuable. They learn how to instill those feelings into somebody who looks like them. They mirror that. That's the core for me on why diversity is important, why the representation, why the inclusion is important. If you have a child who's differently abled, to have a doll that is in a wheelchair, because you're like your kid who's in a wheelchair. My kid was in a wheelchair for a while, but, or a doll with a hearing aid, or, you know, there's lots of different. Our bodies are different, and there are some doll makers out there who make dolls in the image of you,
Hmm.
you know, this child. And there's a lady who does them for free,
Yeah.
and she makes, you know, you go to her site and you see some of the children, and some of them have some very, you know, different looks, and you would not find that type of appearance on a doll in the store because there aren't that many people who would be looking for that doll.
Yeah. Yeah.
S-
I
So
want
when I
to
look
take
at,
you
yeah,
back real quick, Tammy. I want to take you back to a time, and you're probably going to continue where with some of what you were saying, but I remember when I was growing up, and I remember getting Chrissy, Black
mm-hmm,
Panther Chrissy. Oh, she was the cutest thing.
mm-hmm,
Um, and then a couple of other dolls, but I remember having Miss Beasley. That was a real popular doll back in the way. Come from the what was that show that used to come on with Buffy and Jody?
yeah,
Family Affair, I think was the name
yeah,
of
I
that.
think it was called Family
Yeah,
Affair.
yeah. So that was a big thing to have that. But and of course my Raggedy Ann doll. um, but when I was given a black doll, it connected me to the larger society,
Mm-hmm.
right? It helped me see when I could go into the store and see black dolls there and amongst white dolls, because that was pretty much the choice at that point. It connected me to society,
Mm-hmm.
made me see myself in other places other than my home. Now I can see myself out, where in the store, whether it was the GC Murphy or whatever those stores were we were shopping at back then. But I was able to see myself when that representation wasn't there. Even when I was shopping for my daughter, Brandy, if you still believe in Santa, I'm getting ready to destroy it for you. Uh, she's 37.
Trigger warning, trigger warning.
Okay. But I was shopping for her dolls, and I would get so frustrated because the representation still wasn't there. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of my daughter's great aunts made her a doll that looked like her. Those things were so important. Me not seeing myself impacted how I viewed myself in larger society,
Mm-hmm.
in classrooms with my fellow students, and wherever I would go. Why am I not part of, the dolls in in the store aisle or whatever? Why is it that my features aren't represented in those places? So I want to ask you, when you were growing up, how did lack of representation impact you as a child? And also, audience, this question is to you also. Were you impacted by the lack of ethnic and racial representation? Were you impacted? Tammy, that's my question for you. Did it have an impact on you as a child?
So that's an interesting question because I grew up in a low income housing neighborhood. So most of the people that I knew there were black and brown people.
Mhm.
So I went to a school where we had lots of black and brown teachers. We had white teachers too, but there was a lot of representation there. Our principal was black, and this is an elementary school. And when I went to middle school, I was put in advanced placement classes. Um, Gifted is what they called them, I think, when I was a kid. And so I lived in this one space that was like brown and black.
Mhm.
But when I went to school, I was one of very few people in the room who was not white.
Okay.
And so it was really, I had issues in both spaces
Mhm.
because I got to the point where I really didn't feel like I fit in either.
Mhm.
I remember once, when I was a child, we were being bussed. In Denver, they were busing.
Mhm.
So I remember someone coming onto my bus, another black young lady, and she said, "You ride this bus? You live over here?" And I had people said that I spoke like I was white, and I mean, there's all these different things. But then when I mean, that's what's going on with the black people. But when I get with the white people, it's like I'm not white.
Yeah.
I don't have the same experiences they're having. We're talking about music. I don't. That's not the music I'm listening to. That's not the dance I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so I had a big disconnect from home and school and just in general. I felt isolated and alone because there were very few people like me.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was all, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a reality of number of us that are children, young black children, especially going through that era of busing into places where you were expected to assimilate to white culture.
Hmm.
And and there once again is that whole idea of representation and what it means to be able to see yourself in places, in education, wherever we go, in banks, and wherever we go, the grocery store, wherever. It's so important for us to see ourselves. I'm gonna read some of these comments real quick, and then we're gonna move into this next question. um,
Okay.
so let's see here. Sarah says, yes, I agree. Your doll should mirror you. Absolutely. Tamika said, okay, I missed some of Tamika's. I'm missing some comments. Okay. So Tammy said, I also did not have a black doll growing up. I had the famous white Barbie doll. It would have been wonderful to have a doll that looked like me. Um, Tamika says, oh, when she was young, she had nothing but white dolls. But now, as I'm older, I really appreciate the fact that I can find dolls my color that look like us, also have kinky hair. Yes. Tammy, yes, you are so right. My cousin helped me out a little bit. Family affair. Thank you, cousin. uh, Sarah is agreeing with a comment. And Tamika said, yes, it impacted her not to see that representation. Dean says, I feel like I was not aware of how diverse the world was as a child. Oh, my goodness, Dean, that's so powerful. Oh, my goodness. I think that's what's some of the barriers that we have now, even as we are trying to help build a more inclusive society, is that so many folks are unaware of the diversity around the world. It's
Hmm.
important for Black children to be included, but also important for white children to learn to be inclusive. Thank you, Dean, so much for sharing that. That's so powerful. Tamika, when I was young, all I had was white dolls. I was taught that black dolls with kinky hair wasn't attractive. Lord have mercy, Tamika, when we were trying to get the comb through that doll's hair, and that made us want to do what? Have the white doll with the long hair, blonde hair. And in addition, Tamika says, now all I want to own is a dark melanated doll with kinky hair. Yes. Dean says whether the white parents buy these for their child is another question, but there should be an option. Absolutely. I find here in Australia it's much more diverse now, but the Indigenous Australian representation is lacking. Sarah, that just made me think when I had to move to Columbus, Ohio. My daughter was enrolled in a basically white child car and white
College care, child
child
care.
care, and the white children told her she was white. I was like, "No, you're not." Okay. My aunt said, "I almost forgot to tune in." We're so glad you did not, Darlene. Thanks for joining us. And if you haven't answered the question yet, we're talking about, were you impacted by the lack of ethnic and racial representation related to dolls growing up? Did that impact you, how you see yourself, how you think about wider society? Um, Tammy, I want to move on because I don't want us to run out of time, but I want to ask you, um, how did cultural and ethnic representation in the doll industry begin? And you can answer the second part. Was it part of a larger movement?
That's interesting. So I don't. I think that it began before industry. Like you said, your aunt made a doll for your daughter. Before there was industry, we were making dolls, and we were making dolls in our image. And there are lots of dolls that were made with human hair.
Mhm.
So that was pre, like doll making. But you can go back to like ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and there were people were using molds to make figures. Now, most people think that they were not dolls because a lot of the figures that remain were made from terracotta.
Mm.
So you probably wouldn't give a doll made of terracotta to a child.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, because so much of what so many dolls we assume were being made of natural materials. So they broke down. There's no record of that corn husk doll from 500 years ago, or your apple head doll, or whatever people were using, because they broke down. That being said, we're pretty sure that people were, playing with dolls and making dolls. There've been some fingerprint analysis that were done. I think it was here in Oregon, where they found some spearheads, and
Mm.
they found child fingerprints. And that makes sense, because if you think about how we raise our children, they emulate us. So you would teach your child how to make spearheads, because that's how you protected yourself and that's how you fed yourself. So that makes sense. So I think that the doll came before industry. And then
Mhm.
if you start talking about the diversity in black dolls and whatever, again, I'm assuming that the people in the African countries were making brown dolls that look like them,
Mhm.
and the people in Asian countries are making dolls that look like them, and so on and so forth, because that's who you had around you. There was We know that there was, I was going to say shopping, but when people come together trading.
Mhm.
There were places where people came and they traded, and you got some intermixing. But for the most part, people were, they were pretty much, all these people lived here who
Mhm.
look like this. And so I think that the diverse dolls began then. What we see now, I think, is a result of colonialism,
Mhm.
and we are seeing this pushback to bring more diverse dolls.
Mhm.
And I think that the Black Lives Matter movement has done a lot. The dolls were already coming,
Yeah.
but with Black Lives Matter, it just seems like, there are more dolls. We're seeing more of the small doll lines being sold in bigger stores. So that's a good thing. But I think that most people think that the dolls that they see in the store are the dolls. And it's like an iceberg. You have this little bit above the water and huge amount below. Most of the dolls that are made by small doll artists.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So that's why it's important to to share these people and to talk about them and the dolls that they make. We have been we are very creative,
Yeah.
to people in general. But I see like a lot of black dolls that are being made by people who knit.
Mhm.
So you're making one of a kind dolls, and you don't have to go and have a mold made and whatever. You just need some yarn and a needle and some stuffing, and you're good to go.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of that going on. I saw a few years ago someone said, I'm going to go and say, I'm trying not to say the names of the big people, but Mattel does a black doll every for the for Black History Month. They do some kind of something, and they had this spread on black dolls.
Mhm.
And I was seeing people responding to the spread, and they're like, "Oh, they all look white. They're all," and I was thinking, you're not looking at the dolls, because we have gotten to a point now where, okay, we still don't have a lot of round dolls. We have curvy dolls, but there's a lot of, nose and mouth shapes and skin colors. And so, yeah, you can find a doll that looks like you. And I think that people who are probably having harder times are those who are like in between, like maybe a biracial person would have a harder time finding a doll. My neighbor, her sister was over and she's foster caring some children, and I didn't see them very closely, but I kind of saw them over the wall, and it's like those kids are brown, they're biracial, and it's really hard to find biracial dolls.
Mhm.
So I got a house full of dolls. And so I called the mother out to the front and I said, hey, I said, those are your brown babies. And she said, yeah, those are my foster babies. And I said, okay, may I please give them dolls? Because it
Mhm.
is hard to find brown dolls. So she was really cool. And I, gave the kids some dolls. I gave them, a brown male, a brown female, a darker female, and then a little set of like not babies, but little toddler kind of dolls. So they could go and play house and people can be aunts and uncles you know, and that's my concern, those kind of things. And again, those children are in the foster care system.
Yeah.
So we sometimes see children who come through the foster care system or who are adopted outside of their biological cultures. A lot of them don't have connection with their biological culture because their parents, if they were not part of that culture,
Mhm.
did not get the kids very involved in it. So for me, it was really important that those kids had babies that looked like them. So
Wow.
yeah.
You just brought up just so much, because you when you talk about children having access to uh, their culture. And I have a friend who has been doing work in the adoption community for a long time, specifically for people that are adopting from other cultures. And her work is trying to help people understand the necessity of allowing their children, their adopted children, to be to experience their culture, their birth culture. Um, and so you just made me think about all those children that are also in foster care, or children that are in the system, staying in homes, or and things that really don't, they get what people donate,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of times they're not going to have access to what to a doll or to anything that reflects them. And so now you have a whole system of hierarchy and power driven by the experience of being in someone else's culture, and also not being able to see yourself represented in any aspect of the people that you are communicating with on a daily basis, or you are being that are making decisions for your life. So that's it, that's so important. But the other thing you added was how Black Lives Matter has helped bring attention to that representation. And I had not made the connection, because I'm thinking only from the system level piece of it, which this of course is right there, integrated in that system. But my lens is getting people to understand how to include Black people, but not to the degree of representation through toys and dolls and things that matter. So I thank you for being able to bring some of that to our attention on tonight. We have a couple of other comments. Let's see here. From Adrienne Franklin, she said, I was raised at a time when there were no dolls of color. I wasn't interested in dolls. I preferred stuffed animals and toys. Now I am fascinated by dolls of color. And Tony says, yes, he was commenting to something you were saying. Now, we've talked about this whole piece with children, but we also know that adults like to collect and have dolls as well. Can you speak a little bit of why it's important, and how, now that there is more representation that is impacting adults?
Yes. So I've had conversations with people who've made dolls,
Mm-hmm.
and or created them on some level. And Byron Lars is a he's known as a clothing designer. That's what he does. But he worked with Mattel to create a line of dolls. And Byron, chose these different color, doll heads. And for him, it wasn't, my understanding is for him, it wasn't like, it was like this big dude's like, oh, I'm choosing this color and that color. That he didn't understand the significance of what he was doing.
Mm.
And he said that later on he would be places and women they would literally approach him and cry
Yeah.
and say, you don't know how much having a doll the color of me meant to me.
Mhm.
When I was a child, there were no black
Mhm.
dolls. And Byron created beautiful dolls because, you can go back and you can see times when there were black dolls that were black,
Yeah.
or they didn't look like people. Or so to have these beautiful stylish queens as dolls was just breathtaking for these ladies. And I've seen the same thing with Franz Brent Harris. He's a Canadian doll maker. He makes dolls, but France is an artist.
Mm.
So his dolls are like one of a kind, and he makes silicone dolls, and they are beautiful, round, full body dolls. And again, France said the same thing. People will see his dolls, and it's like, thank you for making a doll that looks like me.
Mhm.
And the power of these dolls
Mhm.
is incredible because France had dolls at a show, and he had a doll that had on an emblem that said, it was like about the size of a dime, and I think it said Black Lives Matter. And a white man walked into the show, sees the doll, becomes enraged,
Mm.
knocks the doll to the ground,
Wow.
breaks. The doll has like a helmet kind of, and it breaks the helmet. And so I asked friends, what did you do? And he says, I took her home, I glued the pieces back on, and I painted red around them so that it's more noticeable for people to see. But there's power out there,
Yeah.
and we're dealing with many things on many different levels.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was thinking back when back in February we did the series on privilege, natural hair, and colorism,
Mm-hmm.
and it was such an important conversation. It was a series, three weeks. We had women on those conversations who were still struggling with the impact of being teased about their hair and
Mm-hmm.
their skin color, and all the some of those things that the internally the black community wrestles with, and then
Mm-hmm.
also externally how other people try to present us
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to our skin color and our hair texture and things. And so what I'm hearing you say, Tammy, is that oftentimes that representation that comes from a doll, even as a person is an adult,
Mm-hmm.
it's helpful for them to be able to see themselves and to understand how beautiful their natural beauty is, how beautiful their hair is, regardless of the texture, their skin color. And to be able to see that helps heal some wounds that were caused through the trauma of being disregarded even by your own race or another race. So I just think that's so powerful as I think about women my age and older being able for the first time to see that representation and
Mm-hmm.
and the healing of wounds of Yeah, I am beautiful.
Hmm.
Got some hips and some other stuff here and some extra stuff there. My hair is tightly coiled or curled or whatever, or it's red or whatever. But yeah, I'm beautiful. And that's reflected because someone thought enough to create art that looks like me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting when you start looking at, like, one of the reasons I saw for people saying there's so many blonde haired, blue eyed dolls is that it's like this representation, and people think that they're beautiful, so and they're talking about representation. Again, they're less than 1% of the population.
Hmm.
So if we're going to really look at what a doll store should look like, now it would look differently in different countries. Now you go to Scandinavia, you got blonde haired, blue eyed dolls.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, because that's what the kids are. You
And
get
hopefully
to,
sprinkle some color in there just so they'll know, as Dean was saying, that
yes,
other people in this world that don't look like you.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But the majority of the world is brown haired, brown eyed, when brown or black haired and brown eyes. And we're talking about, I think I read something that said like 75, it was some huge percentage of the population. So that's what we should be seeing in places that are not, isolated little communities like the Scandinavian countries. We should be seeing a lot more of brown dolls. I live in New Mexico. Half of the population here is, it's like half, the way they talk about it is like half white, half Hispanic,
Mhm.
and I can't remember what the population of natives is, but we're called a tricultural state.
Mhm.
And when I go to the store, I still see a whole bunch of white dolls. They're still the majority.
Mhm.
And if half of the population here is Hispanic, why don't we see more brown dolls?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in the store one day buying dolls. I told you I sent them abroad. And I was talking to a Native American brother. And he was like, you got a lot of dolls there. I was like, yeah, I'm, I'm sending them to Britain, and they're going to be dispersed in a few countries. He said, that's beautiful. He says, we don't have native dolls. And I thought about it. It's like they've got Pocahontas,
Yeah.
and then there's the occasional, there's an American Girl doll who is native. And then there's the occasional special edition doll.
Mhm.
But for the most part, they are not native, or they're collectibles.
Right. Yep.
And we go back to who wants to spend money buying a porcelain doll for a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I kept this comment up here, Tony, Anthony. Um, he said, I don't think most people even knew that they were affected by the lack of color in dolls during my childhood until they realized that dolls could have color. And the reason I kept this comment up here, because it reminded me of a conversation I was having with a friend of mine earlier today, and was talking about the subliminal messaging
Mhm.
that happens in our culture where we don't even realize that representation is lacking, or that our culture, our race, and things is not even part of the picture, because so often, it happens in a way where we don't know it didn't exist until someone is bold enough and courageous enough to bring it to the forefront, to start having the conversation about it, or start reminding us, oh, wait a minute, we are lacking. Ask any woman that goes into the grocery store, to the drugstore, and I'm getting ready to go up north for a minute because down here in Florida it's not so popular. But if you go up to the drugstore up north and you're looking for your pantyhose in your hue, ask any Black woman or African American woman that's looking for a color that fits her, how difficult it can be at times. And so then we have to bring attention to the matter and remind the store folks, hey, I shop here on a regular basis. So a lot of times we don't know these things are lacking until we realize, wait a minute, it's been missing from the culture because somebody has been bold enough and courageous enough to bring it to our attention. But this will be a conversation for another day. The truth of the matter is that's how, our society is constructed, is to, minimize your role in society and your features and your character and who you are. And so we need to make sure we stay aware of those things so that we can be those bold voices saying we need this because we are here, right? Lisa said, yes, representation matters. When my son was little, I often shopped for brown action figures for my son. Oh my goodness. That could be difficult to find. Also, Sarah says, yes, they made the black dolls ugly. And we are beautiful people, right? So why make those dolls look like something that we're not? And that could be for any number of reasons. Now it's getting to be at that hour where we have to close, Tammy, and I've enjoyed this conversation because you have provided us so much education on this evening. But I know that the audience is wondering. She's talked about representation in dolls. um how do I find one? And I want you all to know that we're going to have Tammy to come back closer to the holidays so that, maybe she can provide us some, show us some of her collection and her dolls that she have, but also to connect us with some of the artists that she knows. But before that happens, I just want you to talk about tell them today, Tammy, um if I don't know if you want to share some of the names of some of your, some of the folks that you work with and some of the artists that you work with. But if you do, that's fine. We would love for you to share.
Okay. So I don't know if Taufik dolls are still there. Taufik Okoye made dolls that are competitors with Barbies, and he's from Nigeria. There is Naya Dorsey, makes beautiful 18-inch dolls, Brains and Beauty. Dr. Linda Bede makes beautiful brown and black dolls. She doesn't make them. She purchases them and dresses them really powerfully. And I'm trying to think who else going off the top of my head. Samadi. She has a doll that is um, is programmed. The lady who made the doll is a I believe she's a programmer, and so she's created this doll that is a programmer doll. I mean, it talks, it speaks, and it talks about programming, and she has classes too. Oh God, there's so many. There, Pat. Thank you, Pat McLean. Pat McLean Smith makes beautiful crochet dolls.
Mm.
There are, oh God, there's just
Well,
so many. It's like,
and that's
I
okay.
didn't think about it because I would have written them down.
That's okay because when you come back, my hope is that you can come back maybe in early September. You think that'll be um, a time where people would still have time to order and have dolls for, their Christmas or holidays or Kwanzaa or whatever holidays they celebrate. And so we would, you can then give us those names and tell us, how to go about
Okay.
purchasing. I
And
think.
I will also reach out to people and see if I can get discounts for people who are following the show.
Oh, great, great. I know the audience would like that. Y'all give a thumbs up to this video or heart if you like that idea, okay? Rachel says, I have enjoyed this conversation tonight. I definitely will be looking forward to a part two with Tammy. She is awesome.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Miss Rebecca, for having her on as a special guest. You're welcome, Rachel. I thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm going to ask Tammy for some closing remarks, and then we're going to have to say good evening or goodbye for another couple of weeks, okay?
Okay. So I guess the thing that I want to say is doll history and human history, they reflect each other. And most significant things that happen in history involve dolls, even to our integration. There was a doll study done that was included in part of that Brown versus the Board of Education that led to integration. Dolls, we're all connected.
Yeah.
We're all connected. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dean. Hey,
Now,
Libby. Thank
next
you.
time you come on, I want you to talk more about that Brown versus Board of Education and some of that historical construct also. So this has been a great conversation. The whole purpose of Tuesday Together Talk is for us to be educated and learn from one another. And I know this is a different conversation for the Tuesday Together Talk audience. However, that's a good thing because that means that we are continuing to learn more and more about our society and how we are represented in society and how we can work harder on uh, creating more inclusive spaces.
Mhm.
So, thank you, Tammy, so much. You all know Jennifer says, thank you. Great conversation. Thank you, Jennifer, for
Thank you,
tuning in. Thank
Jennifer.
you all for tuning in this evening. Now, you all know you saw my little note up there, right? Are you registered to vote? Why is she asking that already? I know Indiana, you all had an election today, and I'm hoping that you all did your civic duty.
Mhm.
Want you to get registered and make sure that not only are you registered, make sure all of your license or however whatever identification you use to vote, make sure it's up to date. Make sure your voters registration cards are up to date because we fight voter suppression by
Yes.
being prepared to vote, right? And that's what we're going to do. So thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer says she voted, and that's that Indiana there talking. Thank you. Carrie says, thank you for bringing the awareness to this important subject. Thank you, Carrie, for tuning in, one of our regular Tuesday Together Talk guest conversationalists also. So thank you all so much for all of you that are first time folks here. Come on back and see us. We have a lot of great conversations that happens every other Tuesday. We have a lot of great conversations to happen here. And so we would love to have you as a Tuesday Together Talk audience member. And again, I'm Reverend Rebecca Burrow, founder and CEO of Building Reconciliation, Inclusion, Diversity, and Gender Equity. You can always follow us at at Reconciliation and Equity. That's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Lord, all of those social media platforms that I had no idea about until COVID. COVID got me into this. But you can always follow us at Reconciliation and Equity. And if you want to know more about Bridge, please go to www.reconciliationandequity.com. You can't miss us. We're at Reconciliation and Equity. I am excited that you all hung out with us for this evening. Please come back and see us again. Now, you all stay tuned for our outtake, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm sorry. Don't forget to be ready. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote. Don't forget to vote. Stay tuned for our outtake. Good night, everybody,
Good
and
night,
God
everybody.
bless you.